Well, hi everybody. So today I'm going to be going over the big Radials Nieuport 17. I'll show you how to start it up, how to take it off, and do all that good stuff. Before we do get started, though, I will say that this thing does have guns on it. And just be aware, if you don't buy this thing through bigradials.com and you buy it through the marketplace, you won't get the guns. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing this, or if you're planning on purchasing this. But we'll go ahead and get started here. Alright, well, welcome to the cockpit of the Nieuport here. It looks really good. I have to say that, in my opinion, it does look really good. It took me a long time to even really find anything wrong with it here. And if I said anything was wrong with it, I think I'd be being overly critical of the plane. So, I mean, and even up close, it looks really good. Like the wood grain looks really good. The leather looks good. Everything kind of around on the interior looks really good. The exterior is also pretty good looking. I do think that the interior does look better than the exterior, but they both look really good. So we'll go ahead and run through the instrument panel, some of the features of the plane, and get it started. Alright, so we'll start out here with the clipboard. And it's a really simple looking clipboard. I guess it kind of fits in with, the time period of the plane, which is kind of neat. But so you have the ability to hide or show the guns. You can swap out the airspeed indicator up here for, well, I guess you can't swap it out, but you can switch between knots and kilometers per hour. By default, it is in kilometers per hour. So if you click on this, as long as this thing is X'd out, then you're in knots. So I prefer to do it in knots. I'm going to do the rest of the video here in knots. And then you can remove or show the chocks. You get like an oil can outside too. And then you can go into the checklist here. Now all of this you can still access if you've left it over here on the side of the cockpit. So you can still click on everything over here. And then we have the ability to fire the guns. Now, they don't do anything, they just make a noise. The one thing I will say is that I think my mouse is kind of going out, so I'm not entirely sure if what it's trying to do here is simulate it jamming, or that's just that my mouse isn't working all that well. So, the thing that kind of leads me to believe that it's trying to simulate the guns jamming, aside from the fact that even if they do kind of jam up here, you can still just go ahead and fire them again, is that one of the features of this thing is the little hammer over here on the left side of the cockpit. And so when the guns jam, you click on it, it comes up here and it bangs on the gun. And I thought that was kind of neat. So with that out of the way, we'll run through the instrument panel here real quick, if you can call it an instrument panel. Alrighty, now there is one thing I did forget to mention about the tablet clipboard thing over here, is that you can hide or show the radio. And so you just need to click on the symbol there, and it'll bring up a radio and a transponder over here on the right side of your cockpit. So to get started here, we've got the airspeed indicator up here on the top left. Then we've got the compass here. Now the compass is kind of interesting. You can kind of rotate the compass up or down to make it a little bit easier to see. And then we've got altimeter, RPM gauge, and a clock. On the left side of the cockpit here, we've got your mixture lever, throttle lever, fuel valve, and fuel level is right here. And then we've got the two switches for the magnetos. And that's it. So we'll go ahead and get it started here. Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and get started here. We're going to want to first flip open the fuel valve, flip on both magnetos. We'll want to make sure the mixture here is up at rich, and then we'll go ahead and crack the throttle a little bit. Now, as far as actually starting this plane, since this is Microsoft Flight Simulator and we don't have anybody to go out there and crank the propeller over for us, there's really two places that you can click to start the plane, and one of them is here inside the cockpit, kind of anywhere on the firewall here, Or you can do what I'm going to do, which is just kind of lean outside the cockpit here and click on the engine cowling. Now you will have to hold this down pretty much until the engine turns over. Once it turns over, you can let it go. And that's pretty much it. We've got the thing started, so we'll go ahead and head out here to the runway. Alrighty, well I decided to take off from the grass today. Before I do take off, there are a couple of things I'm going to go over real quick. One of which is called the blip switch. Now you will need to bind this to something, preferably something that's easy for you to get to. And its keybind is located in engine instruments, and it's called toggle master ignition switch. What this is going to do is it's going to allow you to cut the motor and then start the motor up again. Now, I bound it to what I normally bind, like drop bombs to, but you can bind it to whatever. The reason I say that you want it somewhere that's accessible is because you're going to need to use it while you're coming into land. And effectively what you're using it to do is to slow the plane down as you approach. And I'll go over this a little bit more when I actually do come into land. But the second thing is that this thing doesn't taxi very well. There's nothing really wrong with it. It just doesn't turn very well, and it won't turn a very tight circle. So the manual says that the easiest way to get around that is to basically turn the rudder in whatever direction you're trying to turn in, and then give it a burst of power, and it'll kind of spin itself around. I also have found that the wheel brakes, like the individual wheel brakes, help in turning a little bit. Now the manual says that you don't have wheel brakes. What I'm going to assume they meant by that is that the real one doesn't have wheel brakes, because you do have them in the game and they do function on this plane. So the only thing I will say about that is that it seems as though they've decided to kind of punish you for using your wheel brakes, especially on landing. So I wouldn't really recommend using them. Even a slight application of brake pressure on landing seems to like to nose plant this plane pretty easily. So I'm going to attempt to land this thing without using wheel brakes, so we'll see how that goes. But with those two things out of the way, there's not a whole lot you're really going to have to worry about on takeoff with this thing. It's a pretty well-behaved little plane on takeoff. It gets its tail off the ground at about 21 knots, and you probably won't have to use too much rudder, maybe a little bit of right rudder when you kind of initially start rolling. And then you might have to dance on it a little bit as you're going down the runway, but nothing too serious. It's not difficult to manage. So we'll go ahead here and throttle it all the way up. It'll probably take a pretty good amount of power to actually get rolling, and then we'll lift the tail wheel off the ground here at about 21 knots. Then we'll go ahead and put just a little bit of back pressure into it, and it should lift off here right about 55 knots. So we got up in the air, which is always good. Now, as far as this thing, how it flies and everything like that, I really like it. I have a lot of fun flying it. It's pretty maneuverable. Now, it's not anything spectacular. It is a plane from World War I, but it is pretty fun to fly. And it's not that great. It has a pretty slow roll rate. It climbs pretty well. It'll really bleed speed in a steep climb though, so don't expect to like go vertical and go up 1,000 feet or anything like that. But it's not very fast. In level flight, you'll probably be getting something like 90 knots or so out of it. Now, the one thing I do like about this plane is that it kind of feels light, and that makes sense to me, at least because I can't imagine that this plane weighed a whole lot in the first place. But they do a pretty good job of making it feel light when you're flying it. Its stall characteristic is pretty good. You're going to stall at like 41 knots. Now, I have noticed that sometimes it seems like it'll stall closer to 38, but for the most part, overall, it'll stall at about 41. Alright, well, we'll go ahead and bring it in here for a landing. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce the throttle here down to about 15%. As you can see, we're not really slowing down that much. So this is where the blip switch comes in very handy. We're going to go ahead and click it once and we'll kill the motor, and then we'll click it again to turn the motor back on. We'll want to do this pretty much continuously until you get yourself down to about 60 knots. Once you've gotten yourself down to 60 knots, you pretty much just leave it alone. At 15% throttle, you should be able to maintain 60 knots. So go ahead and reduce the throttle down to 0 here. Hit the blip switch a couple more times. And we should set down here right at about 50 knots. Then we'll use the blip switch a couple more times. This is where it really comes in handy on the ground to slow you down. If you see the propeller getting kind of slow like it is right now, you need to turn it back on because it will kill the motor completely. So, and then we've gotten below 30 knots, so we'll go ahead and put some back pressure into it to ground the tail. And we'll keep hitting the blip switch a couple more times to slow it down a little bit more. Now, the one thing I will say is that when you are landing, you really do kind of want to get it below like about 30 knots. Even though the stall speed for this thing is 41, it just kind of, it seems, at least to me, that it feels like it wants to pick the plane back up when you start to put the back pressure into it to try and ground the tail. So once you've gotten it below 30 knots, then you can apply that back pressure, or you can just honestly let it ride it out until it gets to about 21, then it'll set itself down. But that's pretty much it for the Nieuport, so we'll go into the review here, and that'll be it for today. Alrighty, so if you would like to pick up the Big Radials Nieuport 17, you can get it either from bigradials.com or from the Microsoft Flight Simulator Marketplace. It's about $18. Just be aware that if you buy it from the Marketplace, you won't get the guns. Your purchase also includes a bush trip through Paris based on a real flight carried out by Charles Godefroy in 1919, in which he flew through the Arc de Triomphe. I hope I pronounced those right. Though he did it in a Nieuport 27 and not a Nieuport 17, but I don't think that really matters. And then you also get 2 landing challenges with it. So overall, I like the plane. I think Big Radials does a pretty good job here. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know a lot about the Nieuport, so I kind of looked around on the internet for a while. It was supposed to be a highly maneuverable fighter and one of the top ones of its day, and it seems like they accomplished that here. A small caveat may be that in terms of maneuverability, that's in comparison to other World War I aircraft. As far as the texture and the model quality go, I think they're really good. I didn't find any gaps or anything like that. There might be a few surfaces that could have been a little bit smoother, but you'll have to get pretty close to see them. The texture quality is pretty much the same way. Everything looks really good. There may be a few imperfections, but again, you'll have to get pretty close to see them. In my opinion, this is actually the best looking canvas plane that I've seen in Microsoft Flight Simulator so far. It's not like there's a lot of them, but either way, it does look really good. I did go look at some videos and some pictures of the paint scheme that I used for this video, and it looks like a really good representation of it. The one thing that I will say is that it seems to be more silver than white, and this one looks white. The one weird thing I did notice about that is if there's cloud cover for some reason, then it does look silver. So I don't really know what that's all about, but either way, it looks really good. I also thought the streamer and the pilot scarf were kind of neat effects. The flight model, aside from being fun, I think it's pretty good. It seems to be kind of light, or it seems to feel kind of light. Now, empty, I think this thing only really weighed like 850 pounds or maybe 875, so it seems right to me that it would feel that way. As far as its maneuverability, It's pretty good. Now that being said, I do have a really hard time doing an ice implement in it. When I come over the top, I can't really keep it level for the roll, so it ends up looking more like a bad half Cuban. The only reason I bring it up is because the manual mentions doing an implement. I find it a little bit difficult to do that. The roll rate is kind of slow, but just put a little bit of rudder into it and it'll speed everything up. It's not a fast plane. This variant itself is the 110 horsepower engine. It's pretty stable. It's pretty predictable. It's going to do what you think it's going to do. Again, it's not fast or powerful, so don't expect to be doing any kind of crazy aerobatic maneuvers in it. But it is just a lot of fun to fly like 2 feet off the ground. The sound overall is pretty good. The engine sounds good. The switches as well. The one thing I did like is that you can kind of hear the airframe creak under stress. Though I only noticed it when I had my headphones on, and kind of all of the other sound effects were turned down a little bit. So I guess I could have been imagining it. But the guns sound good as well. I did like the little hammer. I thought that was kind of a neat effect. So overall, I like the Nieuport. It's quite a lot of fun to go fly. Maybe we can get some more World War I airplanes in here. That would be kind of neat. But that's pretty much going to be it for today. So thanks for watching, y'all, and I hope there's a next time.